is that doesn't matter. We'll do that afterwards. But guys, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you very much for joining me, Lucy.
Pleasure.
We've had the pleasure of chatting a little bit a couple of times beforehand already. So I obviously know who you are very well. But what would be great for you to just tell everybody else who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Lucy Nathanson. I'm a child therapist specialising in selective mutism. And so I solely work with children with selective mutism, and I've been doing so for the past almost 10 years. And I've worked with over 350 children with selective mutism. It's my absolute passion and favourite thing in the world. And yeah, I've written a few books on selective mutism and have some online courses for schools and for parents.
Yeah, and I want to get onto those books in a little bit actually, but because you're, and then I guess, I mean, I don't know if anybody's joining us from Lucy's page, so I just quickly, you know, I guess I'll just quickly introduce myself. So I'm Max Evans. I'm the writer and director for a film that we're currently trying to develop, which is about divorce. It's about selective mutism, and it's also about the this really special bond that children have with their pets. We've started our crowdfunding campaign, so you can see that in the comment section. I've pinned that to the top there, so you can see the campaign video and see in a little bit more detail of what we're trying to achieve with the film. And what we've done is because obviously we want to get the subject matter right. That's really, really important to us, and we want to get it truthful, and we want to do it accurate, and we want to do it especially with participation from the community itself, from the SM community itself. So that's why we've reached out to people like Lucy, who've got this incredible wealth of knowledge, who are experts in the field. And as you've just said, you've worked with 350 children yourself over the last 10 years. I mean, that's just an incredible number. So what we're doing with experts like Lucy is we're getting a really good insight, and more importantly, we're getting you guys to really help us shape the story, so we get it just right. So you're actually the first. So we had a Facebook Live a couple of weeks ago with our child consultant Rachel, who's a young girl who's living with SM. But you're actually the first expert that we've had on a live, and as the first expert, it falls to you to give us the kind of the clinical definition, I guess, of what SM actually is and what it entails.
Sure. So selective mutism is an anxiety disorder whereby children are able to speak freely in some certain situations, most commonly at home with parents and siblings. However, in other specific situations or with specific people, they're unable to speak. So commonly children may be mute at school, or perhaps they may be able to talk to friends but not to teachers, or perhaps they may be able to talk to one teacher but not other adults at school, or perhaps they are not able to speak at all at school. It really depends on the specific child. A lot of children with SM some children with SM may be unable to speak to certain extended family members, and a lot of children, I say the majority, are unable to answer a question from a stranger. So if a stranger asks them a question in the supermarket, what's your name, how old are you? In this situation, it's really common for children with SM to freeze, maybe even look at the ground and be unable to even make eye contact with the person, and of course not be able to respond to the question.
Yeah. So
it's an anxiety disorder, preventing them from talking in these specific situations.
And I think what's really important to also point out, it's, you know, because a lot of people, they hear selective mutism and there's this misconception that it's voluntary almost, you know, that they are selective about when they talk and when they don't talk, which obviously is completely untrue. So what I'd love to know is kind of your journey with SM. So you know, where did you first come across SM, for example?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for highlighting that. That is a massive misconception that children are choosing not to talk. That is not the case. They are physically unable to talk in those situations. It's a physiological response whereby their throat actually tenses up. And children often say that their throat feels blocked and they can't talk at school, or in the specific situation that they can't talk in. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that. So, sorry, what was your question?
So, I just really wanted to know how you first came across SM, where your journey started.
Sure. So the first child that I worked with who had selective mutism, actually at this stage I was a student studying psychology at university, and I had not heard of the phrase selective mutism, and I was doing a placement year, going to 8 different schools for children with various different needs. And actually, I came across a child with selective mutism in the only mainstream school I went to during that whole year. So I went to schools for children with speech and language difficulties, for children with physical disabilities, children with, a variety of different needs. And the only mainstream school that I went to was where I came across a child with selective mutism. So I was being shown around by the head teacher on the first day, and he showed me to the reception classroom, and I just was drawn immediately. As soon as we walked in, it was quite strange. I was drawn immediately to this one child who was playing by himself. And it's strange. I don't know why I was so what it was that kind of drew me to this one child. And it's quite crazy because it's almost like a sliding doors moment. If who would have known if I hadn't have asked this one question?
Yeah.
So I said to the head teacher, why isn't that child talking with anybody, or why isn't he playing with anybody? And he turned to me and said, oh, he has selective mutism. He's been at this school for 2 years and has never spoken to anybody.
Wow.
And that was the moment where I started to ask questions. I said, has what is in place to support him with this? And they said, the speech and language therapist has assessed him, the psychologist has been in for a meeting, but we've tried everything, but nothing has worked. And I went home and started obsessively researching selective mutism, and I don't know, it kind of lit a fire within me. And I said to the head teacher, can I please work with this child while I'm at the school for the next 3 weeks? And I was a student, so he thought, great, give her something to do. And so I just he said I can work with this child every afternoon for those 3 weeks. So I did, and it was at the start it was very intuitive. I could see that it was clearly an anxiety disorder, and I started to just build a bond, a rapport with this child, and just took away all pressure for him to talk to me. I didn't mention anything about his lack of speech to me, and he started to feel comfortable with me. And then throughout those weeks, he started to talk to me, which was just the best thing that ever happened to me. Up until that moment, I was just like, went home euphoric.
Yeah.
And by the end of those 3 weeks, he was putting his hand up in class, answering questions from the teacher, the TA, and the TA said to me, maybe you should go home and write a book about how to help a child with selective mutism. So yes, that was the first child, and it just was, life-changing. And I just knew that I have to do this again. I have to help more children who are in a similar situation, who, apparently nothing has worked, because they absolutely can begin to talk. We just need to support them in the right way and put the right strategy in place. And
do you think that's one of the issues, is that, number one, it seems to be not very well known in the first place, but then there doesn't seem to be, and obviously you can speak to this because you've done it successfully, but I was wondering if it feels like there's not a kind of a very good I don't want to say there's not a good idea of how to treat it, but there doesn't seem to be it seems to be quite misunderstood, and that seems to be getting in the way of how to treat it, or how it's dealt with. I don't know if that's correct.
Yeah, it is very much understood, hence why raising awareness of selective mutism is so important. And, you know, as we said at the start, it's not a choice. And I hear it almost daily, I'd say, a few times a week, where teachers, parents are just, without not saying it in a you know, spiteful way, but just, you know, oh, he chooses not to talk to this person, and I have to correct them, and have it. And that, you know, it appears to be such a small misunderstanding, but it really impacts our whole approach to helping the child.
Yeah.
And luckily now there are books and resources available, which is great. There is a lot more awareness now than there was in the past. So, you know, children do successfully overcome selective mutism all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are a lot of misconceptions, but there are a lot of positive resources these days as well.
I mean, and saying that, because you said your journey obviously started 10 years ago. So I was just wondering, in terms of how much change has there been within those last 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't actually ever reflected on it. I'd say, well, 10 years ago, of course, I'm sure you've heard of the resource manual by Maggie Johnson and Alison Winton. So the first edition did exist. I got my copy straight with, you know, when I met that little boy. So it did exist, which was great. Now there's a second edition.
Mm-hmm.
There was, you know, I'd say there are a lot more YouTube videos now on selective mutism. When I started making those YouTube videos,
I was just going to say, we've got to interject here. Lucy has a great YouTube channel with amazing videos where she goes through all aspects of SM. So that's a really good resource for anybody wanting to know more, or who, you know, who's going through it themselves. Sorry, I just wanted to give you a shameless plug there.
No, thanks. Yeah, so now at the time, I don't think there were many videos about selective mutism, so I started doing so. I, you know, you know, just started recording on my. At the time, I had like an old camera, an actual, you know, Canon or whatever, like a small one, and yeah, just started making videos about selective mutism and raising awareness. And of course, now there are a lot more channels out there, which is great. There are even people who have experienced selective mutism themselves making videos about SM, which is amazing.
Yeah. So
definitely the awareness has grown over the years.
And then I just wanted to quickly touch on something else, because you talked earlier about it's obviously it's an anxiety disorder, but you said it has real physiological effects on the child. So, you know, the one that you mentioned is that the muscle constriction in the throat and you know, therefore not being able to speak. And I was just wondering what some other, you know, how else might it manifest itself? What other physical symptoms is there that people can look out for?
Yeah, sure. So just like whenever we're faced with something that we find really scary, our body responds in a certain way. Our heart might start racing, we may start sweating, and we experience this fight, flight, freeze response, which is very real. And so children with SM may experience any of these symptoms, and actually they may also, because it is an anxiety disorder, children often have the fears, that the anxiety extends beyond just speaking. So children often are unable to, it depends on the child, every child is unique, but some children have anxiety around eating in public, maybe unable to eat at school. Some children may be unable to use a toilet at school. Some children have a toilet phobia. Other children, the fear is actually asking to go to the toilet. So for other children, it's the not wanting, or the fear of like getting up and leaving the room,
drawing attention to oneself.
Exactly, like physically doing something different, because drawing attention to themselves is really anxiety inducing. Other children are just physically really stiff, and their movements in situations where they feel anxious are you can see that they're physically unable to move very easily. So there are a range of different experiences that children with SM may have, and of course general worries children with SM often express lots of worries to their parents, worrying about, what will happen in this situation, just overthinking situations and just feeling very worried. So, but again, not all children with SM do. Some children appear very happy playing with their friends. They're just not talking.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the main kind of things that has come up over and over again in all the conversations that we've had about SM is that it can actually be really hard for parents to spot that their child has SM, because they'll be completely happy and chatty and going about life at home because it's their safe space. But then as soon as they go out, so for example, as you said, especially in school, that's where a lot of the freezing can occur. But obviously the parents might not see that, and until somebody flags it from the school, so this is what happened with Rachel, who we spoke to, who her mum said, at home she is, her mum said you can't get her to shut up. She just talk. And then, but then at school is where she would just, be unable to speak. And she said, we had no idea until somebody, we went to parent-teacher evening and we thought, oh, they're going to tell us, Rachel's doing great and she's so chatty and she's so happy. And, and the teacher said, oh, so does Rachel speak at home? And she said, and Esther, Rachel's mum, just said that was such a watershed moment for them. And I think that's probably what happens for a lot of families, where you just you don't know at home because the child is coping fine. Yeah.
Yes, and often parents might think that their child is just shy and just to just wait for your child to settle in, wait for them to outgrow it. And what often happens is the longer we wait, the more entrenched the SM becomes.
Yeah.
And added to that mix is if a child is bilingual, the belief is they're learning the language. So parents have told me that the school hasn't even told them that the child hasn't spoken the whole year, because the school has just assumed that the child is learning they haven't they're not comfortable with the language. So the parent has, it's the end of the year and the parent have no idea that the child is not talking at school.
I think, and that's a lovely segue you just created for us there, because that kind of perfectly leads into my next question, which is what, as you just said, teachers or other people might have different ideas or different thoughts of what's going on. So I just wanted to ask you, what are the misconceptions around selective mutism, and also around the children who are suffering with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So of course, the one we've already mentioned, that they're choosing not to talk, they're stubborn.
Yeah.
That is
difficult, is what we've heard a lot.
Yeah, that is the number one misconception. And as I say, it's not said in spite. Staff just say, they'll say in passing, she chooses to talk to this person but not to the other person. So it's child is choosing not to talk. That's a misconception. Another misconception is that it's caused by trauma or abuse. So the child must have experienced some kind of traumatic event. That's another misconception that is, of course, not the case. That the child can't. It's just shy. That they can't speak the language yet. That a big one is that they'll just outgrow it with time. And that can really hinder progress, because the longer we wait, the longer the child is not making steps forward, the harder it will become. Early intervention is key when working with children with SM. There's a huge difference between working with a 4-year-old compared to a child who's a lot older. Although even older children can overcome selective mutism, definitely. It happens all the time. But the earlier that we start the process, the quicker, for sure. And
talking about age, when is there, does selective mutism normally manifest itself at a certain age, or around the same age, or can it even appear much later in development, or is it normally something that there kind of from the beginning?
Usually usually manifests itself around the age of 3, 4, 5, when the child goes to school. Because if if they're at home, the parent may see signs of it in public when they're asked a question in the supermarket, or when an unknown person comes to the house and the child shuts down.
Yeah.
But the parent just assumes that their child is shy. But then when they go to school and the child has not spoken for an extended period, then it highlights the SM. So yes, usually manifests around the age the child starts school.
Yeah. Okay. And then obviously, we've talked a lot about when it starts and kind of the symptoms and the physicality of it. But obviously, there's this huge other bit that you've got to take into account, which is the effect or the impact that it has on the child's life and also on the family's life. So I just wanted to know if that's something that you could speak to a little bit about, the impact that you see that selective mutism has on the lives of children and their families and how it affects them.
Yeah, a huge impact, huge. For the parents often feel powerless. They don't know where to start. They don't know how to help their child because their child is talking when the child's with them. So they don't know where to start. And not only that, there are the added challenges because of the lack of awareness. People often, sometimes there's a lack of understanding from others around the parent. They might assume that the parent is an overprotective parent, which, that stigma just does not help. A parent who's trying their best to help their child. I
mean, or even worse, people may think, well, it's an abusive parent and the kid's suffering from trauma. And that's, to be labeled as that as a parent, that's awful.
Exactly. So we've already got this, the parent is already having to deal with this condition that they are unsure where to even start. And then there's often this, as you say, there are misconceptions, there's lack of understanding, labeling them as an overprotective parent. Often parents struggle to get the intervention for their child. Even, booking a meeting with the school may tell them to just wait for the child to outgrow it. Parents have to just be an advocate and be really assertive sometimes and really thought that their child does need. So it's not easy at all. The parents have to be really, really strong. And then of course for the child, they are experiencing an anxiety disorder. And as I said, the longer they are not getting the help that they need, the longer the anxiety exists. So, going to school can be really hard for them. Often children with SM have separation anxiety. They don't want to, often children don't want to go to school because it's so overwhelming for them being in that environment for, the whole school day, sometimes being unable to speak to anybody. Children, it's not uncommon for children with selective mutism to have urinary infections because they have been unable to go to the toilet all day.
Wow.
It's quite unbelievable. So it can be very isolating for children with SM. But at the same time, there's so much that can be done to help them. So children can definitely overcome it, but they won't just start talking miraculously.
So that's actually that was my next question. You're doing a great job of helping me guide me to my next question. So thank you basically for doing my job for me. But really, what I'd like to talk about a bit more is, because we've talked about how it manifests itself and all of that, and how it affects them. So what's the treatment methodology in that case? Like, how do you help a child overcome SM? And maybe more specifically also, how do you do it?
Sure. So it's a graded exposure behavioural approach. So what that means is we need to help the child in small steps to work towards their goal. The goal being, again, it depends on the specific child. every child needs to be have an individualized plan, but we need to work towards the goal in small steps. So the first step, regardless of the goal, is to take away all pressure around talking. So we need to create this really pressure-free environment. The goal at the start is really for the child to feel comfortable, even non-verbally. We want them to start to feel at ease, and that comes with actually treating the child completely normally, not asking them any questions at the start, just you know, giving them the impression that it's absolutely okay if they don't talk. You know, we want them to feel totally comfortable, even non-verbally. That's step number one, taking away all pressure around speech. And then once that's achieved, often even that can make a big difference to a child.
Yeah, oh God, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
And then the next step is to work towards the goals in small steps. And if we imagine the goal for the child to be on top of the ladder, so if the goal is for them to talk to, you know, their teaching assistant, they'll be on top of the ladder. And then we break down that goal into steps, and we have to, graded exposure is about the child practicing doing something that they can do, something achievable, practicing that achievable step until it's easy, and then practicing the next achievable step until it's easy.
Yeah.
So we're very much being led by the child with figuring out what can they do and starting there. So if, you know, if the goal is for the child to use the bathroom at school, maybe they can go, you know, pre-pandemic, maybe the parent can take them to the adult toilet at the end of the school day, so they can go with their parent and become desensitized to a cubicle, because maybe the cubicles with, you know, the children's toilets is too overwhelming for them, because they're you know, it's very noisy, there are lots of children there. So they start going there. So we figure out what can they do and start there.
So and it's almost doing. So it's basically like trying to build their skill set, so to say. I don't know if that's a good analogy.
Well, we're helping them. Yeah, we're helping them to become desensitized, or to become used to something, whatever it is, which is a step towards the ultimate goal. And with the help of a therapist, or even parents on their own, as I mentioned already, the Selective Mutism Resource Manual is an amazing comprehensive book that parents and schools can use to put a plan in place and figure out what the goals are for that child, and how can we break this down into steps for them. Or if there is, and unfortunately there is a lack of specialists and trained professionals in SM, but if you have a professional who can guide you, even better.
Yeah. And then obviously, so that's taking more of a, or that's the approach that you take, and that's how you do the treatment. Obviously, you know, as you just said, expert treatment is one step, but then obviously there's also the family and friends aspect and how they deal with it. So I just wanted to ask you, you know, what can friends and family do, and also how can they behave around a child with SM to help that child?
Great, yes. So I've got a video on YouTube called The Do's and Don'ts when interacting with a child with selective mutism. And essentially, we want everybody around the child to be following these do's and don'ts. Basically, interacting with the child normally, not making a big deal out of the fact that the child is not talking. Don't expect the child to talk to you, because if they haven't spoken to you yet, if you ask them a question, they're probably not going to answer it. So, and the more that we put the child on the spot, the higher their anxiety level and the harder it is for them to talk. So don't expect the child to talk to you. Play with them, interact with them, talk to them, but don't
pressure them.
Don't pressure them at all.
Yeah.
You know, you can be describing, you can be playing a game, and you can be talking away, but don't expect them to talk. And don't make comments about them not talking as well. So don't act as though, you know, it's completely normal that they're not talking. So don't make comments like, "You're not talking to me again, are you?" or anything like that.
Yeah.
just interact with them normally, treat them completely normally, and then the child will start to feel more comfortable with you.
And I mean, you've said it a lot, it's play with the child, and I think that's probably a really good, and that kind of also, and you know, don't expect the child to speak, and that actually really nicely fits in what we're doing with the film, is that because in the film, our protagonist who's got SM has his dog, and that dog for him is very much that, you know, that closest and best companion, which I think a lot of children have with pets, because exactly as you said, it's a non-verbal relationship. You know, there's no pressure. They're not expected to do anything. They're not expected to talk, which I think helps a lot of children. And so we were speaking with Dr. 𝗕cie in the US. And she specializes with animal-assisted therapy in helping kids with SM, and that's what she was saying. You know, she said it helps children to have that connection with an animal, with a pet, because there's no pressure, and that's exactly what you said. It's just taking away the pressure, and not expecting them to speak. You've also mentioned a lot the SM manual. But also, you yourself obviously are an author. So I'm going to again shamelessly plug you here and say, you know, Lucy's got an amazing array of books on her website, and I just wanted to ask you about those books and kind of what you wrote them for, and what you're hoping, you know, what they can teach children and parents.
Yeah, sure. So the books. So each book I've written has been to solve something. So the first book was the Selective Mutism and Beginner's Guide, Understanding Selective Mutism and Beginner's Guide, and that's a very short book with the key points about selective mutism. Because what I found is that, you know, there are some great books out there, but they're, you know, textbooks, and parents need to give information to teacher, to uncle, auntie, grandparents, neighbour, and those people are simply not going to read a big book about the topic. So parents were basically asking me for something that would just be very, you know, to the point, concise, and they can just, you know, concise, easy to read, no jargon. You can pass it to auntie, she can have a flick through and just get it, just get the misconception, you know, just get it. So that was the first book I wrote, just a very brief book, so that parents can just hand out and, you know, just raise awareness. And then after that, there was the My Name's Eliza and I Don't Talk at School. And this was a book for children, and a storybook for children, but also a guidebook for parents and professionals. So it starts with a section for adults, and it just explains the general you know, approach to helping children with SM. It links to parts of the story, and there's some discussion questions that you can ask the child while you're reading the book. And then there's a story about Eliza, and the idea of that book was, for number one, to help children realize that they're not the only child in the whole world who doesn't talk at school, because, you know, Eliza doesn't talk at school, and for children to self-identify with this character and almost externalize their feelings, because it can feel really, you know, I would say the majority of children with SM have never met anyone else who doesn't talk. In certain situations, so they feel as though they're very different. So this character was created so that they could talk about and not someone else. And parents often tell me that the child will say, Eliza's like me, and it's empowering for them to read about. But not only that, the second half of the story is the intervention plan, how Eliza starts to make steps forward. So we can then use it as a therapeutic tool, and parents can say to the child, if the child is ready, why don't we try some of these strategies? And then the Ben book, which is the most recent book, is a similar book for boys. So it's called My Name is Ben and I Don't Talk Sometimes. Which is a similar, you know, Ben talks about his, you know, his struggles, but it's not as focused on school. So he talks about how he feels at his birthday party when everyone's looking at him, and he talks about, I can actually show you an illustration.
Yes, please.
So this is the Ben book. So
Because they're amazing illustrations inside. Yeah,
I know. I love this illustrator.
Yeah.
So this is done at his birthday party, and it says, you know, when other people come to my house, I get a big worry feeling and my voice gets stuck. At my birthday, lots of people came, and you know, I didn't like it when they all sang happy birthday to me and so on. But so it's just to help children to, you know, realize that there are other children who feel like this, and then again to show the strategies so that parents can use it as a springboard to say, why don't we try something like that? So the art of the book is Why Doesn't Alice Talk at School? And this was so the 𝗦𝗲𝗻𝗵 and Ben book are for the child with SM, but then parents are saying to me that, you know, peers ask questions. Peers say, why doesn't he talk? When is she going to talk? And how do we explain this to a child? So I wrote the Alice book, Why Doesn't Alice Talk at School, as a tool to show to friends, the class. It's read in classrooms. Teachers will read the book to the class without the child with SM present, just to help the class understand what SM is and, crucially, how they should act if your friend does talk. So yes, each of the books had its own purpose.
That's amazing. And you can get all of those books on your website.
Yes.
But that's so because I was just thinking, you know, we don't want to keep people too long, obviously. So I really just wanted to have one last question, and that was really, I've been really lucky now, and I've met a lot of parents, and I've met a lot of people, health professionals, but also a lot of kids who are struggling with SM. And for me, one of the common threads seems to be that these kids who are really struggling with selective mutism, although they might look like they're struggling on the outside, they have this incredible strength on the inside. You know, they're very intuitive. They're very in touch with their emotions. They're very caring. That, you know, they have these incredible, rich inner lives, which obviously people don't get to see. But so really, from you, I just wanted to know, you know, if there's one takeaway from this discussion for the viewer, or from this talk, what would you want that one takeaway to be about kids with SM?
Wow. Just one
takeaway, or two takeaways.
I'd say just just understand that these children are experiencing anxiety, that they, you know, it is preventing them from talking. Understand that, you know, they absolutely can overcome their anxieties, their fears. They can begin to use their voice, but they need the people around them to support them with that. And they need time, they need space, and if they are given those, you know, those key ingredients and the support of a supportive teacher, a teacher that has the time to just gives them that extra time, that extra support, who's willing to work with the parents, and for people to listen to the parents. Listen to the parents. They're not being overprotective. They're not being difficult. They just want to do whatever they can to help their child to get through this.
As anybody would.
Sorry?
As anybody would. You know, any parent. Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. As any parent would. So listen to the parents, and you don't have to do a lot to help the child. It might just be, you know, spending some time, coming over, playing some games, but in the right way, in a non-pressured way, and the child can absolutely make steps forward with talking and overcome their fears and show their home self in all situations.
Yeah. So Lucy, thank you so much for chatting today. That was, you know, it's always so great talking to you, and you know, you're so passionate about the subject, and I think that's, you know, that's so special, and it's amazing to see people like you who really care and who, you know, who are so knowledgeable, just trying to help, and trying to help kids, and trying to help parents, trying to help families. So, you know, thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for everything you do. So, you know, to all the viewers, you can find out more about Lucy on Confident Children on Facebook, and then it's confidentchildren.co.uk, right?
Yes.
Yes, and you can get all of her books there. You can get all of the resources there. There's the link to her YouTube page, as said, also there with all these amazing videos. I've put the link for our crowdfunding campaign that we've just started for the film. That's in the comment section. Please go and have a look at that. You know, we're really hoping to just shine a spotlight on children off SM, on children suffering with divorce. We just really, you know, these are two groups of children that are so underrepresented in stories, in film, in media, and we really just want to give that insight into what it's like for them. So please check that out. That's in the comment section. And thank you so much.
And you as well, Max, for first of all raising awareness by creating a film about selective mutism, and also for reaching out to so many people in order to do SM justice, to portray it in the right way. It's so important.
Yeah,
so thank you.
That's definitely something that's so important to us, to the entire team, is that we want to just get it right.
Yes.
So that's really important. Lovely. Thank you so much, everybody. I really enjoyed that. Have a lovely weekend. To all those with kids going back to school on Monday, good luck. I'm sure that's going to go great. Yeah, if you have any questions, Lucy's available on Facebook, on her website, and check out our link for the crowdfunding campaign.